Hi, I'm Sheefali Asija, ideaXme Humanism Ambassador, and I have here with me Patricia Weltin, CEO of Beyond the Diagnosis. Patricia, would you like to introduce yourself?
I am the CEO and founder of Beyond the Diagnosis, and I think most importantly, I'm a rare disease mom, which is why I'm in this space. So I have two children with a disease called Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, which is actually, I consider, a rarely diagnosed disease as opposed to a rare disease. I just think it's very, very much underdiagnosed.
And what led to your decision to set up Beyond the Diagnosis?
I actually started working in this space 9 years ago after my daughter had had spinal cord surgery, and I was under the assumption that my daughter had a disease called hypermelanosis of Ito. That's what she was diagnosed with, my older daughter Olivia, when she was 3. She had a lot of hyperpigmented macules on her body. At the time, they said it would just be cosmetic. You know, there was a Facebook group for it, which I was really surprised that it was very, very rare. And the doctor that was a specialist had only seen about 9 cases in his career. So when I started working in Rhode Island, and all I wanted to do, I was noticing that the Rare Disease Day events were, at least in Rhode Island and a few other states, were disease specific. So my feeling was when I met somebody else with a child with a rare disease or someone with a rare disease, it didn't matter to me. Our journey was the same. And so I was able to connect with them in a way that I wasn't able to connect with other people. So I wanted to do an event that was, more family oriented, less about lecturing. And, we would have a magician and a photo booth and just getting families together to, isolation is a big issue with people with rare diseases. So I wanted to get everybody together. And my plan was to do one event a year and only work in Rhode Island. When we started, we were called Rhode Island Rare Disease Foundation. And then we had our event, and it was one of the biggest events in the country. We had 150 people drive out in a blizzard to go to it. And we ended up getting a call about 2 months later from one of our senators in Rhode Island who wanted us to work on legislation it was called the Expert Act, and it allowed the FDA to bring in outside experts when they're dealing with rare diseases. So I started thinking, wow, maybe I should start an umbrella organization where we work by state, but we're working in all states. And we started doing it. We started working in Massachusetts. We started working in New Jersey and Florida and some other states. And we were building on that. And then everybody that worked with me was either, had a rare disease or was a mom. So a lot of good ideas came out of this because we, like the saying goes, we know what the need is. I don't need to be told or taught what is lacking in this space. I was living it. And so were all these people working with us. So then we started, one of our board members wrote legislation for a Rare Disease Advisory Council. And we filed it in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and that's when things got a little, this space is competitive because there's so few dollars to go around. So I don't know if you're familiar with NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders.
No, I'm not familiar with.
Okay, well, they actually really liked the idea of what I was doing, and so they just created their own business model and now they call it the Rare Action Network, and they liked my legislation, so they also took that. And I was, at the time, left with no other programs. We had just started the art exhibit. And so I didn't have any programs. And, we were just thinking about doing the art exhibit, and then the art exhibit exploded. So it took up all of my time.
Why art? Why art? Why portraits?
It was actually an accident. One of my board members' daughters came to me and said, I want to paint someone with a rare disease. And for a high school project, can I paint, do you know someone? And I of course, I knew a lot of people, and I said, oh, I'll reach out to some of my friends. And I started thinking, it took 18 years to get my daughter correctly diagnosed. So diagnosis time was a huge issue for me. How do we reduce diagnosis time? And for me, it meant being in the medical schools, and being in the medical schools in a way that was impactful, in a way that they would not forget us. So we had 2 programs that were, I think, really, really impactful. And one of them was the exhibit. So when I said, I'll just put out a call for art in Rhode Island, and, we'll create this tiny exhibit and we'll travel around New England. That was my goal. Mm-hmm. Which kind of brings me to the whole, you asked about our logo. In medical schools, the reason our logo is a zebra, in medical schools, they used to teach, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, meaning think more common diseases and not rare diseases. So, of course, the zebra for us is is recognized as an orphan disease. So we wanted to make ours, but we wanted to make it kind of powerful looking and colorful, and because we are an art exhibit. So we started with 17 portraits. I think we had a couple of artists from Mass, but most of our artists were from Rhode Island. Our first venue was Brown University Medical School, and we were written up in the Rhode Island Journal of Medicine, did a story, the local news did a story, Brown University newsletter, plus their newspaper did a story. And then we reached out to Harvard Medical, and then we said, maybe we get a few more portraits, make it a little bit bigger. And we started reaching out to more artists. And by the time we went to Harvard, we had 35 portraits representing 35 different rare diseases. And we were in Boston Globe. Harvard put out a press release. So we were in Boston Globe, did a print story. We were in Stat News, Boston Magazine, Today.com did a story, and then a producer for CBS Sunday Morning called, and it exploded. Everything I have not reached out to a venue since then. All of the venues have reached out to us, and we cannot meet the demand. I cannot meet the demand for this exhibit, especially during the months, Rare Disease Month is in February. So everything in this gallery, it's just, the hardware is hanging. There's nothing in the gallery. Everything is gone. Every portrait, every reproduction is visiting somewhere.
Does your gallery travel together? Do you have all your portraits going to specific places, or do you split them up depending upon the specialization of the area they're going?
We actually, what we do is, in the beginning, when we first started working with these groups, many of them have become permanent partners. We want to give them a new exhibit every time we go. So most venues take between 10 and 15. We've done bigger venues. We did the Rochester Art Center with the Mayo Clinic that took 42 portraits, and Texas State I think they took 40 as well. But most venues didn't have the room to hang more than 15 or so portraits. And so what we do is every year we make sure that no one ever gets the same. Sometimes they will request, because they're working on a specific disease, so they'll request. We want to have, maybe Batten disease, or we want to do, we're working on that, we're researching this disease at our university or wherever we are. And so we want that this year. Can we have that? And we try to accommodate everybody. But again, most of what's being done and, what we put out there is so that they never, ever have the same, it's always something different. Every year it's always something different, which we love.
What is the size of your exhibition as of now? How many portraits do you have?
We have about 110 portraits right now. We have some outstanding, and we're over the summer is when we assign portraits, because we're much too busy. For us, planning for Rare Disease Day begins in September. So we're so busy. So during the summers when we assign portraits. So we'll be beginning that process. So we have some coming in.
And you mentioned Rare Disease Day. When is that day?
Rare Disease Day is February 28th. I shouldn't say that. Rare Disease Day is the last day in February, because then you have leap year. And I think the reason that it was chosen that way is because it's unique and rare. But it's a tough time to, in the States, to travel in February with winter and I always say, Rare Disease Day is every single day.
When you had set up this initiative, what were you expecting? And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
My hope was that we would capture the attention of medical students, and that they would see us less as a disease and see our humanity, in the hopes that they would become more interested in these diseases. It's very daunting to even pronounce most of these diseases. Never mind, know that there are 7,000 rare diseases. How do you learn about 7,000? You can't learn about 7,000 rare diseases. And I also, by that time, knew that, the parents and the patients were very, very well educated in their diseases, and that they should absolutely be part of the process in a way that I never thought. I mean, my mother had ovarian cancer, and I never once, questioned what the doctor was telling me, or, thought that I might find something out that they didn't already know. And she also had Alzheimer's. And I never did that with Alzheimer's either. But this is a different, it's so much is unknown. And what has happened has exceeded all of my expectations.
What has been the response so far from the medical community?
It's absolutely, it's stimulating research. It's starting conversations. It's, it's reached the general public in a way that they're able to engage with us. When I used to talk about rare diseases to people, their eyes just kind of glaze over. It's really something people don't know a lot about. They don't know how many people are affected. There's 30 million people in the United States with a rare disease. 30 million, that's a lot of people. Half of those are kids, and they're struggling. They're suffering. They're dying because they don't have treatments. And to me, that feels like, okay, that's not something you think about happening in the United States. That's something you think, might be happening in a developing country. But what I think is people don't understand that, these kids are suffering. And there's a very real, burden to the families. And I always say the impact of rare diseases is not 30 million. That's just the people with rare diseases. The impact it has on your family is, mothers, they often can't have somebody working, one person can't work. Or if the person has a rare disease, they're on disability. There's so many aspects of it that are just crushing. And I think that people don't recognize that in this society. And my hope was, and I think this art exhibit is changing the way that people are looking at these kids and looking at the issues of rare diseases in a way that is comfortable for them. They don't have to pronounce these kids' diseases. They just have to know their names. And they can get that. I mean, I've opened up the gallery there's a lot of galleries in the building I'm in. We don't sell anything, but I always come and I open up the gallery and people stop in. And, I see grown men brought to tears, and they all had no idea. I had no idea. So I think the impact, the messages and the feedback that I get is extraordinary. It's extraordinary, and I try to relay to our families and our artists in particular the impact that they're having, that they're truly changing our lives, and it's beyond really anything I ever hoped for. Could never have hoped for what we have done. We have exceeded my wild things that would never have entered my imagination. are not only possible, but have been done. And now we're thinking, wow, what can we do? You know, now the possibilities seem endless, you know. Going international, we just unveiled a portrait in Ireland, this past Rare Disease Day, which was amazing. We're painting, we painted two kids from Ghana. We're painting, actually the little girl behind me, and we're painting a little girl from Iraq. You know, we want to, this isn't a problem for the United States. This is a problem for the world. And I think, you know, the people that I've worked with in other countries, you know, it's that much more difficult. We want to, you know, a lot of times there's a stigma with a rare disease, and we want to show, you know, people all over the world that these kids are beautiful, that they're humans, that they're loved, and that they're really, well, not all that different from your child. The other thing the thing about the exhibit is, I think it shows people what is the same about my kids and your kids. Your kids might not have a rare disease, but these kids, I think these portraits show you what's the same, and that's what's important.
When you mentioned raise awareness, so well, sorry, I'm going to start again. So, are you hoping to engage with pharmaceutical companies, or are you hoping that that starting with student medical professionals, you will be able to build up enough of maybe an understanding of the challenges that children and people face, that message will eventually trickle up to the pharmaceutical companies?
Oh, they've already got the message. We've done leadership meetings. We've had them rent the exhibit for their, you know, their own facilities. We even have, for a pharmaceutical company, one of their employees is one of our artists. So we've reached not just the medical schools. You know, we go to the NIH every year. We go to the FDA every year. We go to hospitals. We go to research institutes. We go to the Broad Institute every year. You know, this is going beyond medical schools. This is anybody, any stakeholder in rare diseases it has become engaged in this exhibit. We just unveiled a portrait at the FDA a couple of weeks ago.
Fantastic. And
yeah.
And would you be do you see this leading to more funding being allocated to some of these diseases, or are you hoping that with technology and better understanding of genetics, where personalization of medicine has become so much more of a reality, that you would not need to go through large pharmaceutical companies to get personalized treatment?
Well, what I think is that rare diseases we're so in our infants, like, you know, we don't have anything. You know, we don't have, you know, they say 5% of rare diseases have a treatment, but a lot of those diseases, there's more than one treatment. So the actual number is lower. You know, how many diseases it should be, which percentage, not how many treatments there are for rare diseases, but what percentage of diseases have a treatment. I think that's lower than 5%. So we're really starting, you know, I've applied to grants for companies that, you know, the answer was, oh, well, we only do access to healthcare. Well, we don't have any healthcare to access. You know, we're starting from scratch. So I think awareness and engagement and, you know, starting conversations about rare diseases for us is a huge deal. And I also, you know, my dream one day is I'd like to get Congress, you know, get all of these kids in front of Congress and see that they are not moved. They will be moved. They will get it. And so, you know, and to affect legislation, you know, we're already thinking about how can we start off in each state with the exhibit so that we can get in front of our legislators and, you know, maybe get more funding for rare diseases, and because it's just so important. And I've seen that, you know, testimony is effective. This is just incredibly powerful and really unforgettable.
How large is your is your community, and how do you see this growing and evolving?
You mean as far as how large is the community?
Well, I imagine you, of course, have parents, you have your artists, and
yes, we have about 78 participating artists.
Yes.
And, 100 families, 100 or so families, but they represent all of the children that are, suffer with these diseases. So right now, obviously we can't, with 7,000 rare diseases, we're trying to put a face to everyone. So we're only doing one portrait per disease. We don't have the resources to do more than one portrait per disease. But I think that, I don't know what that is going by my office. Sounds like a herd of elephants. Sorry about that. So, they really do, they're embraced by the whole community of that disease. We actually also, another thing we never expected to happen, I had somebody from the New England Hemophilia Association contact me. At the time, we did not have a portrait for hemophilia. And they said, we would like you to come to our Fall Fest with your exhibit, which is like a family conference they do once a year. And I said, I don't have a portrait for hemophilia. And I said, you know what, why don't we do one and then we'll unveil it at your event. And we'll bring, I think I brought 8 portraits. And the people at the conference, even though they were there for hemophilia, and that's the disease they were dealing with, were just as interested in the other portraits and the other diseases as they were in hemophilia. So we've seen this community around the exhibit that really, we didn't have before. We didn't have a way to really come together around one beautiful project that was doing what we all wanted it to do and that we all needed it to do. So that was amazing. And now we're doing disease-specific groups are saying, yeah, we want you at our exhibit. I mean, we want you at our venue or our conference, or, which is, to me, is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Because we all know, being together on this and being united on this is absolutely necessary to move all of us forward. But I wanted to make another interesting note that a lot of people, we knew when we started the exhibit that we were dealing with fatal diseases. That some of these diseases were fatal. We would retire the portrait when the child passed, and we would send it to the family. So when the first child passed, I reached out to the family, and I said, after time, and I said, we want to send you your child's portrait. And they said, oh no, can they stay in the exhibit? And I said, absolutely, we would be honored. And we've actually lost 8 kids now, and not a single parent has asked for their portrait back. They all want their child to kind of live on and to work its magic and be part of the exhibit, which is an incredible honor for me. Just really, really incredible.
Do you have other art collaborations and projects in mind? Other than
we do a lot with video. So now that we've seen what we can do here, our next kind of foray into visual arts is going to be video. We did a video for, I believe we need to educate. I want to have a generation that already knows about rare diseases. I'm tired of, I think we have a zebra pin, but I think it should be as recognizable as the pink ribbon. And, I want to raise a generation that already knows. I'm sick and tired of telling people the statistics around rare diseases. They should already know. So that's how we do that. We wanted to, do like an educational program, and we wanted to do videos that were engaging to high school and middle school kids who then grow up to be, the part of the community.
And If you could pick anyone to meet, who would you pick? And if you could ask them any question, what would that question be?
You know, if we're talking specific to rare diseases, I would really like to meet Abby Myers, who was the mom that started all this with the Orphan Drug Act. And, you know, just ask her. I mean, I know why she did it. I know, you know, why all the moms do what they do. But she was faced with, you know, she was really starting this whole movement, how she didn't give up, you know, like she was facing some tough opposition to the Orphan Drug Act and to rare diseases in general. And it was just so new. It was really how they define them. And I can't imagine, you know, I came into it when everything was kind of already in place. Still really much more needs to be done. But I think, you know, I actually won an Abby Meyer award once, and I was like, yes.
Would you be able to, for our audience who's not familiar with Abby Myers, would you mind introducing her to our ideaXme audience, please?
Yep, Abby Myers' son had a rare disease, and there was a drug that she was using for it, and she, the drug company, it wasn't profitable to keep making these drugs, so they were going to stop making it, which means her son was going to suffer again. So what she did was create a legislation that incentivized the pharmaceutical industry to work in the rare disease space, which, you know, was absolutely necessary. You know, you were dealing with these really small populations. You know, everything about this is hard. From the beginning to the end, everything about this is hard. So I think, and so then she, you know, of course, went on to pass the Orphan Drug Act and started this whole, really the whole movement, which has been wonderful. And I feel honored to have, you know, won an Abby Award.
And how long back did she campaign for legislation?
I think it was 1983 when she started. So it really hasn't been that long in the whole scheme of things. When you think about disease, which is kind of sad that, you know, rare diseases has been neglected for such a very, very, very long time. Which is another thing, you know, she was really, she was a maverick, you know, to say, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to create this, and and she was not taking no for an answer. She just wouldn't take no for an answer, which I love. I mean, it's hard. It's a difficult, I think, you know, when I consider all of the nonprofits and all of the causes, this one's, I think, one of the most difficult. I mean, that we have no surrounding rare diseases. We have no, I mean, really, dogs get more funding. You know, somebody told me they were doing a fundraiser for dogs in I don't remember which country it was, and I thought, wow, our kids are dying. You know, I love dogs too, but I love these kids more.
If you could pick anyone to meet, that would be Abby.
Yes.
And what would you ask her?
I would ask her how she stayed the course. How, in the face of how difficult this is, how she was able to stay the course and not, you know, just throw in the towel.
How long did it take for her to go from campaign to actually having legislation passed?
You know what? I don't know how long it was, but it wasn't that long. She's one tough lady. My understanding is that she actually, I think it was Reagan that was going to veto the bill, and she was going to she wrote to him and said, I'm going to take out a full page ad, and you know, she was just like not having it. Like, I am not having this. You were going to sign this bill, and they did. So that was really great. I also am very, very impressed by AIDS activists and how they were able to move the needle for the treatments that they needed. And I think that, you know, a lot of us could learn from the way they approached activism. And we don't, you know, we don't have to deal with a lot of the issues that they had to deal with, like misunderstanding and hate. You know, we don't have to deal with that. And they still change everything for their community.
With whom have you connected? Who has altered your course of life? And what impact does it have on you and the world around you?
I think that what started off to be negative turned out to be something really positive for me. You know, when my daughter first started presenting with the hyperpigmentation and the brown spots, she had it all over her body, kind of, they were swirls, and we had been to several different dermatologists, and we ended up in at Boston, the head of Boston Children's Hospital. And then right after that, she started getting a lot of, at the time, sinus infections. She was getting, she needed several sets of ear tubes. She had eczema really badly. And, you know, when I would take her to different doctors, and, you know, one doctor would say, you know, at night she would cough and she would vomit in her sleep and not wake up. And I would go in and check on her. I noticed that, I mean, she could have choked on her vomit, but she wasn't waking up. She had, you know, she was having postnasal drip, but she wasn't showing signs of any real allergies. Like during the day, she didn't have the typical sneezing, watery eyes. So no one was looking at that. And I realized that when you go to a specialist, they diagnose you with what their specialty is. So when we took her to the gastroenterologist, they said it's reflux. When I took her to the otolaryngologist, they said sinus infections. And after, you know, years of infections and tubes, she had endoscopic sinus surgeries. One day I said, I think she has allergies. And I took her to the allergist, and they did tests, and they said, your daughter is off the charts. Even though she had no real typical symptoms of allergies. And now I know what she is experiencing, what she's been diagnosed with, is mast cell activation syndrome. So I think that changed everything I believed about myself. And it changed everything I believed about the medical community and how it works. It truly empowered me to believe, you know, I got a D in biology in high school, and I successfully managed to avoid it in college. So I did not have a lot of confidence in myself in that regard. And that whole experience of working with the medical community, seeing that they had become so hyper-specialized that they weren't looking at the whole picture, and also that I could be valuable to my daughter and to the medical community with what I knew, changed everything about the way I think and the way I do things. Yeah, absolutely everything.
How long was it from symptoms to correct diagnosis?
18 years, and I diagnosed her. I'm the one that figured it out.
How did you deal with it?
And then
How did
both
you
of
deal
my
with
daughters.
18 years? Pardon?
Yeah, 18 years. They were wrong. And now the diagnosis that she originally got of hypermelanosis of Ito, I have since, you know, I belong in the AHI group, and I've since found studies done back in 1958 that connect mast cells with hyperpigmentation. And I kept saying, you know, I think that this HI disease is another manifestation of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And actually, a research institute thought, you know, when I presented them with it, said that, you know, there's enough evidence here to study this, which is, you know, now they're sequencing these people. But just recently, someone in the AHI group said, I just got diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I said, oh, I just knew it. It's just another manifestation of, you know, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So, that was not just, that was the connection was so important to me, like, and that they listened to me was amazing. I give that guy a lot of credit, who, I brought this research to, and I said, look, this is what I've seen. This is what's happening. There's something going on here. Here's some research that I found. And so that's wonderful.
And what about support that you got those 18 years? Were they organizations, agencies, doctors?
There's none for HI. There's one small group that a woman runs out of the UK on Facebook. And she's wonderful, and she's done a great job. But for HI, there's not. EDS is everywhere. It's, it actually affects millions of mostly young women. So there's a lot of EDS support. But for HI, there wasn't. So at the time, I would call her doctor, every few years, and I would say, is there any new research about, because, at first they said it was going to be cosmetic and that she would only be those spots. But as she grew, she had deformed hands and feet. She had an overgrown mandibular. There were other things happening with her that were not cosmetic. She ended up having tethered spinal cord, which is when I started this. And at the time, I still believed that that the tethered spinal cord was connected to the HI. And tethered spinal cord is a very common comorbid of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So, everything, over the years, and she wasn't, she had a lot of, like I said, tubes and infections, and she would get sick a lot, but she still had a lovely childhood. And she was still able to, we had a summer home and go swimming, go to the beach. And, she did eventually end up in a wheelchair when she was 18, but she was a Division I, number 1 doubles tennis player. She had a good life. It didn't impact her or my younger daughter until their teens. And it was more of a hormonal thing that kind of kicked the disease in.
Can you think of an instance you have influenced someone else similarly via social networks?
I can. Of course, because I work non-disease specific, I'm friends with a lot of people with different rare diseases, people whose kids are in the exhibit. And one of the moms, Annette, who runs a group for KBG syndrome, had posted a picture of her son's legs on Facebook, just on her regular Facebook feed. And she said, we're going to have, his legs are really, this child is nonverbal, a lot of seizures. And she said, we're going to have his Achilles tendons cut because his legs are so tight. And I said, oh, that sounds unusual. And I said, I'm going to ask her some questions. And I said, does your son have a sacral dimple? And she said, yes. And I was saying, does your son have, issues, bladder or bowel dysfunction? And, I asked her a few questions like that. And I said, you might want to have him checked for a tethered spinal cord. And Annette is brilliant. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman. And she immediately went right to researching it. And she called me back and she said, I think he's got a tether. This fits him to a T. And a lot of times when you go to, which is what they told me about Olivia, when you have a sacral dimple, they'll say, if it's closed, they'll say you're fine. But the reality is with the sacral dimple, 70% of the time there's one present, you have a tethered spinal cord. And it's hard to find on an image. And so they call it a cult tethered spinal cord. So it's really a clinical diagnosis. And he ended up having a tethered spinal cord. And she had the surgery to release his cord. And he was able to walk for the first time in many years. And his seizures decreased. And his cognitive functioning improved after. And then she went to her group and invited me in and said, listen, do any of your kids have a tethered spinal cord? And it turned out that 3 more since then have been diagnosed and had their cords released. So yeah, there was a little influence going on there.
Oh, that's amazing.
it's about openness, it's about I'm always open to what I'm seeing and what I'm reading and what does it mean and how does it connect with the larger picture. And Annette's openness to not only post about her son, but to be willing to listen to another mom and say, let me look into this. And then, when she had the information in hand, say, wow, this fits. Really, we actually, Annette and I were invited to a medical conference at Brown, and what we found out was presented at this medical conference, which was really nice. Moms, I'm telling you, in this space.
Yes, mums are going to save the world.
Yep. The moms in this space are remarkable. I have so many heroes in this space. There's some dads too, but mostly it's the moms, and they are remarkable. The things they've done are remarkable.
Yes. Well, when it comes to your child, there is nothing you will not do. Yes.
There's no greater motivator than love. Nothing is a greater motivator than love. And for someone who is such a rotten student, really, in the sciences, I can read a medical journal article, and I'm often asked if I'm a doctor. My girlfriend and I were at a restaurant, and we were sitting there having dinner, and we were talking about our children's diseases, and the guy leaned over and he said, "Are you guys doctors?" And we're like, "No, we're moms." And this guy was a molecular biologist, and he still thought we were doctors. So, it's never did I think that I would, if you had told me, 18 years ago, that I would understand anything at all that I'm reading, because I like to say I did great in college, but I was not present in high school. I was not the best student. I was not motivated to, do the work, and I was in college, but again, I didn't have to have a degree in finance, so I did not focus on the sciences at all. So everything I learned from scratch. And if you would have told me that I would understand anything at all, I would not have believed you.
Well, it is absolutely fascinating reading about personalized medication. There's this podcast I love listening to, Canadian CBC podcast, Quirks and Quacks, which has been going for 40 years. It is a podcast that talks to a lot of scientists and researchers on what they are doing right now, and this is.
Personalized medicine is a big deal right now.
Yes, and it is amazing with being able to personalize nanobots, being able to personalize bacteria, retroviruses. Right. It's brilliant what we will be able to do in short term, and how these really clever people are coming up with incredibly innovative solutions.
Yeah, that is some amazing. I mean, when CRISPR came out, I was like, oh, wow,
Yes. And the timing of what you're looking to do alongside all this development in technology there's a
lot of interest in rare diseases right now. So, being able to be part of making it something that's engaging, to everyone. When we did that leadership meeting, to see these people with the top 250 employees in the world at a huge pharmaceutical, and they were in tears, they were moved, they'd been doing it for forever. And being able to share that part of ourselves, I think is very important, because we hold so much, we have so many answers. We hold the answers. The community, the kids themselves, and it's almost impossible to work in this space and not be completely engaged with the patients, as opposed to some other, more common diseases.
And do you, with your exhibition, are you going to go for 7,000? Is that eventually you will have 7,000 paintings?
That's our goal. We'd like to actually have like a rare disease museum. Because these portraits are just stunning. and we'd like to house them somewhere. What I'd hoped would happen is that we start opening galleries around the world, and as we do more portraits, and then we can start doing, leave the portraits there, because it's very, very expensive to ship portraits. Yes. So we would have, maybe something in the UK, and then it could travel around. That could travel around Europe, and so I see that as being like our next step in this. It's very, very difficult to get funding for the exhibit, but we keep trying.
Well, I am an artist as well, and
I saw your work. It's amazing.
Thank you. Before I started on my large machine paintings, I used to do people. Well, I still do people, as my kids have demanded I do paintings. Yes, and if you're looking for additional artists, I would be very happy to contribute.
I was hoping you would say that.
You.
It's like, oh my God, maybe she'll paint one of our kids. Amazing. Absolutely.
I would be honored to paint one of your kids in your extended community.
We would be honored to have you. So look for an email from me over the summer. What we do is we send the artist 3 to 5 reference photos.
Yes.
We ask the parents. A lot of these parents have Facebook pages for their kids. Mm-hmm. And they also have, blogs. And so we ask for all of those links, and then we send that to the artists as well. A lot of them, actually, one of our artists was like, I live, 20 minutes from this family. So they set up, we connected them, and he actually went to go meet. He wanted to take the reference photos himself. So he went to go meet the child, which is, he's making a little documentary out of it. Well, you got to look for that. I'll send you the link when he's done.
Oh, wonderful.
But, it's the artists become completely immersed in this. There's artists that they, you will fall in love with these kids. It's
of course, this is
it's like a great project. And, a lot of them have done more than one. Many of them have done more than one. We've actually had one artist who has done about 5 now, and I have to keep, I'm like, look, every time I get somebody, it's like, I want to do that one. I'm like, you can't do everybody.
The point is to have a community.
Yeah, right. It's not one. Yes, exactly. And but he's so good. He's so good. He's the one that he was the #1 caricature artist in the world. And
that's the painting. I do remember coming across the painting. One of your caricature. Yes, he was a caricature artist who did.
Right, and he had never done anything realistic.
Eyes, yes.
And then he did that Tegan, the little boy over there with the sunflowers.
Yes.
He said that, and it's like, what? He said, I don't know if I can do anything realistic. And then he sends that. I'm like, that's too realistic. It looks like. So now we've actually become very, very good friends. And he's done 5, and he's got 4 more in his queue. He's demanding, I need to do this one, like the little girl from Iraq. It's like, I really want to do this girl from Iraq. And, he's very, very giving. So we're excited.
Well, reading your website, it was really moving to read comments by various doctors and people in medical profession. The whole turning this into a human story rather than an impersonal. Yep. Yes, there is a body that requires certain treatments, and you put in the treatment, and then that's it. But yes, these paintings
just takes it to an entirely new level. And we've actually had institutions say, you know what, we're going to research this. They haven't yet, but we're going to do it based on when the event, when your portrait is here, we want to do this, and we're going to have our fellows do it, so it's actually, stimulating research, which I never dreamed of. Never.
No, I was surprised that of course, but then when you think about it, with technology now providing opportunities, that why would you not do this with personalized medication? Exactly. You can now actually treat each person as an individual, because we are, and we are our own unique bag of cells and and biome and microbiome. So we all require personalized medication. So
Yes.
it is.
Every disease doesn't, even, with the genetic diseases, every disease doesn't present the same. And EDS is a variety of, there's about 80 comorbids. And every kid in the same family, every kid is different.
Yeah.
Every kid presents differently. So yeah, it's amazing. But we just unveiled a portrait at the FDA of 2 young girls with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, which is my kid's disease. And these girls they look like they walked off the cover of a magazine, but they're both extremely ill. They both had several brain surgeries. One's tube fed. They're both homeschooled because they're not well enough to go to school. But and EDS, causes an invisible illness. And I asked that mom, I'm like, can we do these kids? And the artist that did it, it is a masterpiece.
I know the paintings you're talking about, the 2 girls with light hair.
Yes, they both have blonde hair, and I mean, they look like they were, like this is your typical kid in America, like, oh, look at these, but they're sick. They're very, very, very sick. And, I did that intentionally. Not all illness looks like illness. You can't judge someone and say, look, you look fine. Which we did a lot.
You look really miserable and really ill, therefore your disease must be.
Or you're more like, people will say to me, oh, at least it's not cancer. And I'm like, man, I would trade cancer. I mean, my kids are better, knock on wood, but I see a lot of these kids, I know their parents would say cancer in a heartbeat, rather deal with cancer than deal with the unknown, or an 18-year diagnosis, or no treatments, or, oh yeah, everyone always says they would take cancer.
Yes, of course, because there is a lot of funding, there is a lot of research,
there's a lot of awareness, right.
While the 7,000 you've listed, and I imagine that number's growing as well as more.
Yes, exactly.
Identified.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's also bringing other groups that thought they were 2 separate diseases together. Like, wait a minute, this is the same disease.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks to technology and the fact that people like you are doing what you're doing, using your personal struggle, an 18-year struggle, to create something so beautiful, which will hopefully influence the future future generation of doctors.
Absolutely, that's what we want to do. That's my, that's the goal. But yeah, you can just pick whichever one you want. Let me know.
Excellent.
I would do the EDS one just because I just want to say to my kids, like, hey, we did, EDS is in there. I generally don't do that. People have, even in the EDS community, like, why don't you do EDS? Like, it's your kid's disease, do EDS. And I'm like, I'm trying to be.
That's too close to home.
Yeah, and I don't want to be, it's not about me.
No.
You know what I mean? It's never been about me, and I don't want it to be about me. But, at some point, we have to draw attention to Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. So.
Yes. Excellent. Well, Patricia, sorry.
Only Patty.
Yes, because your name comes up as Patricia, Patty on your image.
Yes, it's fine. Call me Patty.
Yes, I would be happy to participate. I am free after July, if that works for you.
We don't have any time. We give people we are so beyond grateful to our artists.
Yes.
Sometimes it'll be a year before we get a portrait that doesn't.
Oh, good. That's great, because.
Yeah, we don't tell the parents until we have the artwork in our hands. We understand. I understand. Things happen, and so we're just so grateful. And it's not like we don't have any portraits and we're just starting out. So we give plenty of time to our artists.
Brilliant. Well, it was wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you.
So, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, great.
Via email. Okay, Patricia. Bye-bye.
Bye.